Today, you're going to be working your way through front-end development to create this little project right here from the previous tutorial. Before we begin, this video's sponsor is Linode, and they make it easy and affordable to host your site, app, or service on whatever technology stack you use. Unlike entry-level hosting services, Linode is a step up to powerful, fast, fully configurable cloud computing. With server plans starting at just $5 plus no hidden fees or surprise outages, Linode offers a no-nonsense hosting at a price you can afford. So sign up now using the link below to get a $20 credit on your new Linode account. Hey everyone, what's up? Gary Simon of Coursetro.com. So today we're going to take the design that we did, the series of mockups rather, from the previous tutorial just a few days ago, which is right here, by the way, in Adobe XD. And I showed you exactly how to design this from scratch. And I'm taking basically this variation for this tutorial, and we're gonna make it a reality in the browser. We're gonna make it responsive. So we have a lot to cover here. And I'm gonna show you how to do this sort of parallax effect right here. And yeah, this is gonna be fairly certain. I'm not sure if it's gonna be out tomorrow or by the time I upload this video, but this will be an actual page that you can visit to enter your email over here in order to get notified when I release this complete UI design course sometime before 2020. All right, so if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and let's get started. All right, so just to go over what we did in the previous tutorial from a couple days ago, I created these variations for the email capture page, and the one that I decided to go ahead and feature in terms of doing the HTML and CSS or the front-end dev process is one that's more similar to this one, although we're going to be using kind of this color gradient instead of this bluish color. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So first, I'm in a Visual Studio Code, free code editor from Microsoft. We're going to, oh, by the way, I am in a blank folder called Complete UI Toot. So we're going to create an index.html, as always, exclamation point, enter. We're going to type in link right here, enter, and then CSS main.css. Let's create that file as well in folder. So a new folder of CSS, and then main, we'll use Sass. And there's a live extension that we're going to use for live Sass compilation. In a second, it's going to show up right here. I don't know why it takes so long for it to show up. We'll click watch Sass, and then also a right-click index and open with live server. So in order to watch the Sass and open with live server, of course, you're going to have to go to the extensions. And let's click out of these extensions, and you wanted to install live Sass compilation, or is it compilation in live server. So, and then you'll have to reload or whatever if you want to follow along. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So for this, you have to ask yourself, obviously we're going to start with HTML first before we can mess with any CSS. Otherwise, we'll have no selectors, with the exception to the body tag. And so then, when you're working on a project, you're usually going to have a mock-up or a prototype of some sort. I never, ever suggest just starting and the HTML CSS process without first having a design or a mock-up first, because you're just going in blind and the results are always subpar. So the pros don't do that. You always have, a UI designer, if it's not yourself, create the design first, and then you know exactly the elements that you need to specify here in HTML and CSS. So for ours, we're going to go after this one roughly right here. So there's some planning that you need to think of ahead of time in terms of your HTML structure and how you're going to structure things. For us, I am going to have, I showed you at the beginning of the video, that sort of parallax effect with the little UI rectangles. That's one of the first things I'm going to put down in the HTML just to get it out of the way. We're not going to see it initially until we do the CSS portion. So I wanted to get the markup for that done. So I'm going to have a container called proto-container. And by the way, I'm using Emmet abbreviation, so I don't have to type in, the actual div, because it's going to do it for us when we hit enter like that. If you don't know Emmet at all, I do have a free sort of crash course. Just do a channel search for that. So inside of there, we're just going to have another div called proto, and we'll have multiple. So Shift Alt down arrow key. I think we're going to have like 4 of those. So that's the first thing. We don't see it. It's going to be position absolute in CSS anyways. So really the order kind of where it falls doesn't matter, but that's just where I happen to have it here. So now let's get back to the actual stuff that we see. And first of all, think of your layouts in terms of blocks here. So if I were to take this rectangle tool, we can create a block kind of around everything right here. All right, so that's our first element. It's going to be our container element. Usually you'll see it's a standard convention usually for people to wrap everything in something in a class either called wrapper or container. So we'll just do container. All right, and then inside of container, let's see, what do we have really next that ends up falling here in line? So if we go to our mockup, we have 2 columns essentially that we could see. So we have a column here, and also we see that we have a column right here. By the way, ignore this. We'll delete that one. We're going to be using this one right here just for that logo. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a div class called inner. All right, and inner is going to allow us to, if you look right here real quickly, kind of separate the logo from this content right here. And inside of inner, we're going to have a class of left for the left column. We'll also have a class of right for the right column. All right, so inside of left, what we're going to have right here is the actual logo. So image source is going to be images/logo.svg. I'll try to remember to include that if you want to follow along with mine. So I'm going to put complete UI logo. Just check the YouTube description, class equals logo, so that we can reference it in CSS. And then we're going to have a div class of content. And I was wrong about the inner. I forget what I specified inner for. I guess we'll come to that when we get to the CSS portion. But we have the logo here, and then we're going to have a div class wrapper for the content right here. And the reason I've done that is so that with the CSS grid, the way we're going to position this, I want to be able to position this this content here, these 3 blips, vertically centered without affecting this one up here. So I'll explain it more once we get to the CSS stuff. So if anything's confusing now, it should make more sense once we get to the CSS part. So in div class content, we're just going to have an h1 with complete. I want to wrap, as we can see right here, complete is on its own line. I kind of just want complete here, at least the desktop version, on its own block level, so that nothing is floating to the left of it. So we're going to put a span here, which is kind of just a generic HTML element. UI design course. All right, and that's it for our H1. And then we'll just have our 2 paragraphs, which we already saw. I'm going to paste those in off screen. Oops, let me do that again. All right, so we just have our a paragraph. Nothing fancy is happening here. Although, what is going on? Where is the closing P tag right here? Well, we'll just copy this because that's not right. There we go. Okay, so after that, that's the content, for the left column right here. Then we have the content in the right column, which is what? Get notified when I release the course. And then our email, and then these 2 interesting things down there. So now what we'll do inside of there, very simple, get notified when I release this course. Outside of that, we'll have our input. So input, technically we should do type email. I'm not sure why I didn't do that when I set this up. Name equals email. ID equals email, and placeholder equals your email. Then our button, notify me. I'll make me capitalized. There we go. And then we're going to do this little bit down here. So if we come here, we'll see we have this avatar image of myself and then this SVG arrow. So we're going to wrap those in a container of sorts. So we'll call it attention. And then we'll put our two image sources in here. So images /me.jpg. Alt is just going to be Gary Simon avatar, I guess. And then class equals me. And then we'll just shift alt and down this. And this is going to be an SVG, so it's called arrow.svg. So just three images that we have a part of this entire thing. Arrow pointing to email form. Okay. And then class, of course, will be arrow. All right. So that's it for the HTML. So if we bring up our, where's it at? It's at port 5501. So let's go to localhost 5501. I'm looking on my other monitor right now. This is our ugly design right now. And it's our job to convert this and make this actually work and look like sort of like this. All right, so let me go ahead and pause. I'm going to get that images folder in here, and so that these actually start to show up. All right, so I got my images folder in here again, arrow SVG, logo SVG, and me.jpg. I'm also going to try to remember to put this on Codepen as well. So hopefully I think you could just grab the assets from there as well. So when we start the CSS process, you want to go mobile first, all right? So that's why I have on the right-hand side this, my Chrome window here in more of a mobile viewport. If you want to get specific, you can hit Control-Shift-I to go to Chrome DevTools and click on Device Toolbar, and then you can see it at specific sizes, like an iPhone X, for instance. So if we wanted to do that, we could just push this over, and now we can see what this design looks like right now without any CSS. And when I talk about mobile first, the way we're going to do this is we're going to set this up exactly as we want it to look like with our CSS rule sets and our properties for it to work on mobile. And then as we start to expand and we get to bigger devices and larger screen sizes, essentially, we'll go ahead and use media queries and then make adjustments, additions, and etc. to the CSS properties. All right, so the first thing that we'll do is, let me get on my reference monitor here. We're going to import our font at the top, and I'm using Montserrat for that. So if I hit Control B to get rid of that sidebar, all we're doing is importing this URL right here. Again, go to Codepen if you want to paste in, if you don't want to have to type out some of this stuff. We're going to type in body here just to start with the very first tag, which is the body tag. And although technically it would be the HTML tag, never mind. And then we're going to do a margin 0 to get rid of any default padding. As I save, you can see as well, there's hot reloading here, which is always nice to be able to see. The font family will be Montserrat. All right, so you can see things are changing already. A background, I'm going to give it a very light gray, just a bunch of E's, 6 E's to be exact. All right, so we can see that white logo is now starting to show up, although it's going to be purple there pretty soon. Font size, by default, it's 16 pixels, I believe. All right, and then for the height, let's do height here, 100 viewport height. All right, and we need to do that, especially when it comes to the desktop versions. In order for us to have the column, like that purple column over here, extend all the way down the browser, we need to set the body to 100% or 100 viewport heights. So let's continue here. The next one is going to be container, which is the one that's just kind of encasing everything. So we're going to center it up with margin 0 auto. And then also we're going to put text align center. All right, so that's centered everything up over there. Let's focus on the logo here. We're going to say width is 120 pixels to make it smaller. You can see it's shrunk down. Still can't see it because we need to specify the background for one of those selectors. We're going to do the H1 element. Oops, not in there. Outside of there. H1 element is going to be margin 1em 0. So we're giving 1em on the top and bottom, just to space this thing out from the top and bottom. And then paragraphs, the line height's a little bit too close, so I'm just going to change the line height to 1.7 rem units. So it pushes things down just a bit more. We're also going to specify left. So this is technically, it's not left, it's stacked on top of these columns become stacked on mobile, which is a common practice for mobile design because we just don't have enough space to have these these two columns left and right here. So we're stacking them on top of each other by default. So left, we're going to give it a gradient. All right, so I already have the gradient. It's just using a linear gradient. So background, linear gradient, and then these properties right here. This will rotate it slightly. All right, it still doesn't look all right, but don't worry, we'll get there. We're going to put in a padding of 1em. So padding is the opposite of margin. It works inside the container. So we're just going to move stuff away. See how close this stuff is against the edge of this? So there, we've by adding 1em of padding, just kind of move things away a little bit. All right. So also inside of left, we have a paragraph and an H1. We're going to set the color to white for both of those. And that increases the contrast. All right. So not quite sure what is causing this to be. Oh yes, I know the issue. It's because of this SVG graphic. We haven't yet dealt with it, so it's kind of just pushing things and screwing them all up. But the HTML is correct for this part. So let's continue on. After that, we have, let's see here, our right column. I'm going to put just right paragraph. So we're going to specify just the paragraph inside of the right column, which happens to be this get notified when I release this course. And we're going to give it some margin just to push it away more than it is because it's too close to this stuff over here. So margin 2em on the top, 0 on the right and left, and 1em on the bottom. All right, so it's just moving it out. You know what? Let's fix this part now because it's throwing off the layout right now. So to do that, we're just going to, let's see here. We're going to specify attention. And this is outside of everything. Width is going to be 100%. We're also going to specify margin of 0.5em on the top, auto, and 0 here. Auto will like center the entire block container. Text align will be center. All right, and then me, which is the class we gave my avatar, is going to be margin top here, 2em. Width is going to be 3em, and border radius will be 50%. All right, so we're getting there. Now the arrow, here's where we fix the main problem. It's going to be a width of 15em units, and there we go. Now things are starting to look a lot better. All right, so let's continue on where we left off. We were up here after the right P. So now we just have a couple more that we need to do. So inside of here, we're going to have light. All right. So light, let me see, where was I? Oh, so light is complete UI is releasing before 2020. Okay, so there we go. I forgot what that was for. So color, we're going to do RGBA, just make it white with 255, 255, 255, and then 0.7 for the opacity. All right, I had an important flag on here when I did this before. There we go. Now it overrides that. You can see this right here just kind of slightly separates this text. Next up, what we'll do is we'll put margin top 2em to separate out a little bit further because it's a little bit close together. And we'll also put margin bottom 0 because by default paragraphs add a little bit. You know what? I actually kind of like the way that looked though. I think it's a little bit too close to that container. There, that's better. Never mind that one. All right, so after that, let's work on the input because this looks really crappy. So we'll put input and the button. And so it's going to have a width of calc 100% minus 3 EM. So you may be wondering, why did I put 3 EM? It has to do with the padding that you end up adding and the margin. So for padding, we're going to have 0.5 EM just to thicken up. See how like everything, it's like really like where it says your email and notify me, it's really close against the button edge and the input edge. So if we do this, it thickens things up. It just makes it look better and easier to use. Font size, we're going to increase as well to 1.3 rem units. All right, and then we're going to have outline none and margin 1 EM. So 1 EM on top right, bottom left. All right. Now we're going to overwrite just a couple of those with button specifically. We're going to have width calc of 100% minus 2 EM because I noticed they didn't line up. Like this is a little bit less width than this. So we're setting it from 3 EM to 2 EM. All right. And then setting the margin to 0 on it specifically. And then background, we're going to make it this one, the more pink purple sort of variation. And then we're going to color white to make the type white, border none, and cursor pointer. All right. So now we hover over it. It's not going to show cursor pointer when we're using this device preview. So if we toggle that off, we'll see cursor pointer there. All right. So continuing on, after that, we're pretty happy with what, I'm pretty happy at least with what this is looking like here on a mobile preview. All right, so the next step is, at what point do we want this thing to start changing? Because on a desktop, this would be pretty bad. It's not very usable in this massive input, area, the massive button. We need to situate this thing and make it look more like this on the desktop. So how do we do that? All right, so first you may be wondering, okay, at what point do you know where you think the layout should start to break? And so there's not a specific pixel amount. As you can see, when you have the inspector open, sorry, I'm like burping here, you can see it tells us the pixel width and height. All right, so the media query that we're going to use for the first one is around 768. That's a very common one. That's about where this should probably break into multiple columns right here because we have enough width in the screen. So come down here and we're going to type in at media only screen and min width 768 pixels, and there we go. So I was wrong about that. I decided not to have this to be, anything beyond 768 to be a multiple columns, not just yet. I do want to make some adjustments to increase the font size. So like I told you before, body font size, when I changed this from 18 to 20 pixels, because that's what it was by default up here. And so we can see it really affect things if we go from like something absurd to like 26 pixels. We can see how it's not just the font sizes that change, but it's a space between them as well because we're using EM units on a lot of our margins and our padding. All right, so let's go back just to 20. So we're only bumping it up by 2 pixels. I'm also going to change the width of the button. See, it doesn't really, it's a little bit, it's way too long. So we're just going to do button width is 60%. And to overwrite that, I'm going to type important. All right, and then same thing with our input. In order to get these line up, you can't just put width 60% as well. If we did, it would be like slightly off still, just based on how these things are styled. See how it's like a little bit longer? That is frustrating. So we're going to change this to calc 60% minus 1 EM because we had 0.5 EM on the right and left. So now they match up a lot better. That's all I'm going to do for that media query. And then coming out to about 1024, which is another standard media query. Just underneath here, you can see we're getting around 1024. We're going to break into a 2-column layout. So let's just copy this real quick just so we have the media query code and then got this stuff. So yeah, we're not even going to mess with the body tag here. So this is going to be 1024 here. And inside of here, the first thing we're going to change is container. Width is going to be 100%. All right, so wait, I think I already had the width at 100%. Or no, I didn't. I think it would be that by default anyhow, so never mind that. I was experimenting with different layouts, so I still have some unused CSS that I'm contending with. So the logo, we're going to give it a margin of 1 EM and 0. So we're spacing things out more because you're likely on a bigger, you have more screen real estate essentially. Paragraphs, we're going to say line height, 1.7 EM important, just to space things out a little bit further. And then we'll also say strong. Did we have a strong here, a strong tag? I think I did in one of my previous ones, but I don't now. Never mind that. We're going to have inner, all right, and we're going to say display grid. Now, let's go back to our HTML. We have inner here, and we have these child elements of div class left and div class right. All right, so we want to convert this, these two into an actual left and right column, so 2 columns. We're going to do that with the grid. So grid template columns. We're going to give the left one 55% and then just auto on the right. So now things are starting to take shape, although of course they're still kind of screwed up looking. Let's specify left here. Text align left. Can't see all these changes because now we're getting into a bigger sort of viewports here and we wouldn't be able to see our code. Padding 0 and 2 EM, so that's padding on the right and left. We're going to really get it away from the edges here. We're going to say height is 100 viewport height. That's going to push this all the way down. So now we're getting somewhere. We're also going to make this a grid itself. All right, so display grid. You can see this by default, it sort of just pushed things away, kind of how they need to be. There's also content inside of this, so we're going to say padding 0 on the top and bottom, 3 EM on the right and left. So it's really going to move things around. Nice white space. All right, so after that, we're going to have our H1 element, and we'll say margin 0. Font size is 2.4 EM. We're bumping it up a notch. All right. Outside of that, we also have our span. Let's see here. Yeah, our span display block, because I wanted this to be on its own line. All right, good stuff. We're getting closer here. All right, so now let's focus on our right. So just after this left block here, we're going to say right, and we're going to do text align right. Let's extend this out so we can see what's happening slightly here on the right, as we can see over there. Align self is going to be center, so that centers things vertically. Padding, and again, that's all display grid stuff. 2 EM, 1.5 EM here. So we're just moving things around. Justify self as well, center. We'll center that up. And then our input, we're going to specify width. Calc is 100% minus 1 EM. Important. So I decided to make sure that it's 100% this time, just because its parent container isn't very wide. All right, and then let's focus on that button as well. So let's put margin here too. 1 EM on the top just to push things down. And then also our button will have width, 100% important. There we go. There. We are just about done. Yeah, we're done with the main layout right here. So this I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. Let's get this maximized. All right. I could probably stand to make some other adjustments at larger sizes. I'm only on 1920 by 1080 here. But yeah, this is pretty good for my liking so far. This looks like it's down a little bit too much, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I want to go ahead and focus on that sort of parallax effect in the background. Remember, we have all this HTML content right here. Let's get this stuff styled up. All right, so this one's going to be fun to deal with. What I'll do, I think, is I'm going to move this off screen just so we can see at least some of what we're about to do right here. Okay. So what we'll do is we're going to go to our main CSS. We're going to come, let's see here. We'll do this just before our first media query. We're going to say, actually, no, it's going to be in this media query. There we go. Never mind. Sorry about that. Because I really don't want this effect for mobile. So this effect is only going to take place for desktop. So we're going to say proto container. All right. So position is going to be absolute. That's just the way to really position things wherever you want, essentially. Top is going to be 20% from the top of the browser. Height, I'm going to put 70%. And Z index, so that we can see it, will be 0. Width will be 100%. And pointer events will be none. And that's important for when we want to move our mouse around when we hover over it. Actually, what I'll do is just comment this out so I can show you what that actually does. So right now we can't see anything because we haven't done anything, that's going to change the appearance of anything. What we have to do is specify proto, which is the child elements of those divs. There's 4 of them. So we'll say border, 3 pixels solid, RGBA, 255, blah, blah, blah. And this is going to be 0.1. So we really don't want to see much of it at all. All right, so here's what it looks like so far. It doesn't have height on it, which is why it looks kind of like this weird block. So we're going to say width, like 19%. And then height, 80%. And again, you might be wondering, how do I know, what values to put in here? Just experimenting, looking at what it looks like in the browser, and also at different widths and stuff, just to find out what works best, essentially. Float left, they're going to float left of each other. Margin left to get them away from each other by 1 EM. There we go, it's coming along already. And then transform, translate X 10%. We're just going to move it over the whole thing by 10%. See, it just moves slightly because I didn't want this right up against here or too close. And then let's see what else. Yeah, that's about it right there. Now, one issue is you can see it actually. There's 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, and then there's one that we can barely see. You can actually see it right here, but you can see it right here. So this, we don't want that to happen. So we're going to use clip path. Clip path will make it so that we can define kind of like it's like a mask, an area where it will stop right here, because I only want this effect to take place in this area and not over here. So to do that, we're going to specify clip path inset, which is basically a rectangle. And this is 4 values: from top, from right, I think, and then bottom and left from those areas. So 0, 45%, 0, and 0. Now, once I save that, you can see it went away. So now these right here are not extending into this area over here. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so all right, now I think we're getting good. We're about ready to rock here. There was one more media query I wanted to do, and I'm simply just going to paste the whole thing in. There's only 3 rule sets. So at 1600 pixels, this is real like much larger screens. We're setting the body size to 22 pixels from 20, and then just adjusting padding right here. So there we go. This is at like 1920 because we're maximized. I'm on a 2K res just for this video. So this is good. We could leave it like this. It's fine. People get the idea. You know, these are kind of like just, I don't know, artboards or mock-ups, something to do with user interfaces. But just to make it interactive, just to show you a little bit of JavaScript, we'll make these things move sort of in a parallax effect based on the mouse position when it's hovered over this area. So let's go to our index.html. We'll just do some inline JavaScript down here. And we're going to define just a few properties and let left equals document dot query selector left. All right, so just 3 copies, content and protos. So what we're doing is we're saying we want to reference through a property these HTML elements, the one that has left right here. So we're going to get this so we can work with it in JavaScript, and as well as content, which is another div that we have over here, and proto, which is these individual elements here. This has to be query selector all because we're specifying multiple elements that we want to get. All right. So after that, we're going to say left, and left is this whole area right here, right? So left, we're going to add an event listener, and there's a bunch of events like clicks or whatever. This is going to be on mouse move. We're going to pass in an event that will give us information about the mouse position. All right. So then we'll say let move equals event.client x. Client x is basically the mouse position in the x axis times 0.05. So if you were to do client x and just console log this, it would be a large number. We want to really scale it down big time to a much smaller number, which is why I'm using 0.05. I'll show you though what happens when if we just made it like 1 or equal to this value. So that way you're not too confused. I'm also doing +4. So you'll see in a second what this stuff does. If you're confused, don't worry about it. I have another one, move to, and we're going to do this one way smaller. All right, and then we're going to say content.style.transform. Content, again, is in relation to our class of content that holds this stuff right here. So we're going to focus first on moving this content on top. That's 3 pieces of type. So we can change the style, CSS style, through JavaScript in this manner. Style transform. So that's the transform is the property that we want to animate, which is the one you should try to animate as much as possible because it's a lot more performant. So transform, we'll do backticks here, translate x, and then we're going to put in a negative value, and then our property move to type, Gary, type, and then we'll make that a percentage. All right, so let's save that and see what happens. There we go. Now this was the one that says move to with 0.003. If we put like 0.1, watch how crazy this is. Like it's just unusable. So that's why I experimented with several different values, and that's what I came up with. Now let's make this part, these little canvases, move the opposite direction to create that sort of parallax effect. So in order to do that, we're going to say protos for each, because we're using query selector all, so we have to iterate over them. So proto, that's how we'll reference each one of them. And we'll say proto.style, again the same way, transform equals translate x, and we'll say we're not going to do a negative value this time, so it's going to move in the opposite direction. Move percentage, and there we go. Let's see. There we go. Very cool stuff. And as you can see, When we hover over here, it doesn't work because we're only making this work if it's on, left, because we have an event listener of mouse move. All right, so the pointer events thing as well. I know I mentioned that before. I mentioned I would, actually, let's see here. You can see at a certain point, oh yeah, right here, it won't work if you're hovered over a certain area. So pointer events, saving that there fixes that. So it doesn't do that anymore. So that's an important property when you're working with this sort of thing. So now if we go back to a mobile viewport, of course, none of that's there except for this part, which you could use JavaScript to disable that if you wanted to. It doesn't really serve a purpose at this point, but yeah. All right, so hopefully you found that useful and enjoyable. As always, make sure to subscribe and definitely check out the site if I have it linked up here soon, so that you can enter your email so you get notified when I release my really comprehensive UI design course, probably on Udemy and a couple other networks. All right, I'll see you guys real soon. Goodbye.